Welcome back, you guys. Welcome to part 2 of the Q&A that you guys participated in on my Instagram. If you guys hadn't watched part 1, please go ahead and do so. One of these corners. Please go ahead and do so before you watch this different section, or maybe just watch this section. It's all good. But this Q&A is going to be focused on aviation related questions that you guys put in. Thanks for watching the last one, and let's get started with these questions. So first question, how long did my pilot training take? I've talked about this before in a couple different podcasts. I talked about this also in my first video if you guys haven't checked it out. I know it's old, but it still gives some pretty good information. So go ahead and check that out as well if you guys want more detail. But in terms of how long everything took from my PPL, my private license, all the way to my multi-IFR, and then including my instructor rating, everything took a total of 3 years. Most memorable landing. Good or bad? The one you'll always remember. Okay, this is gonna be kind of cheesy, but I think what I'm always gonna remember is the landing back in Calgary when I officially got signed off as a captain on the Q400. I think it'll be a landing I'll never forget. Reason why is I just, I didn't know at the time when I landed that it was gonna be my, the official sign off, but I had a pretty good feeling that it went pretty well and that I'd be receiving my bars. So I was like super excited, and it's a memory I'll never forget. Have I ever flown a helicopter? I have, actually. I have flown one. I've handled it like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. It's a whole other ball game. Have you guys flown a helicopter? It's like next level. So hats off to the guys and girls who do that full time. We actually went to this super cool little tiny airport. It's called Saba Island. If I remember correctly, it is the world's shortest commercial runway. We were there on a crazy experience. I can talk about that in another video. If you guys are interested, let me know. But basically an island hopping trip, and one of the groups of people that happened to be there had a helicopter, and they offered me to go for a ride for just like a back and forth. And we went to Saba Island because we were in St. Eustatius, and it was amazing and super cool to be able to do. So never forget that. What is the most memorable part of your job? The most memorable thing is, I think it's like the satisfaction of bringing people safely to where they need to go, because sometimes you kind of forget that people are looking to you and relying on you and the crew to just get them safely where they gotta go. And you sometimes forget that every single person that's on that plane, all those 80 people that are on board, they are all going from one place to the next. You participate in like this tiny snippet of their life. They might never remember that flight. They might never even think about it again, but you've just participated in getting them safely to where they need to be. It's just cool to be part of that journey. And like, you forget that we do that like 4 or 5 times a day. Okay, next question. Techniques and strategies for passing Transport Canada exam. I could do a full other video on just this. Let me know if that's something that you guys are interested in, like if you guys are studying for those exams. The best thing I'll say, just to keep it short for now, it's acronym RTFQ squared. Read the question times 2 is always what all my instructors told me. It's what I used to tell all my students as well, because half the time those Transport Canada questions, like, yes, it's about the content, but it's really about what they're asking. So just make sure you understand that aspect. What is the coolest thing about flying a plane that someone who hasn't wouldn't know? I think what I go back to for this, like not necessarily in like the airline environment with someone else, but it's a pretty cool feeling, not gonna lie, when you get to do the whole thing by yourself. Like when you've achieved that level, when you've gone solo, you've successfully completed like your task or your lesson or your mission, the satisfaction of doing it yourself, like it definitely gives you that confidence that it's a really cool feeling. What is the dumbest thing I've done as a pilot? I don't think I can answer that. Explain the power-up flight planning, taxiing, departure procedure for the Q400. That is way too much to get into for like a simple Q&A. If that's something that you guys are interested in getting like more details about, just let me know in the comments. Maybe I can do like a separate video just for that. I've heard very tall and very short people can't be pilots. True or false? That's false. For our purposes, no, there's adjustable, portions for all aspects of your seat. Once you get to the airlines, like the pedals move forward and back, the seat moves up and down, so you're fine with that. Next question. Does anyone flub their lines on the intercom? Do you know me? 100% all the time, yep. Don't you get disturbed with the sound when you're flying the Q400? To be honest, it's not as loud as some of like the general aviation aircraft I used to fly when I first started. Because I've been like flying now for like 10 years, you kind of get used to it. Another question, so do you get your type rating when you get a job at the airlines or after flight school? Really good question. A couple of years ago, I think this would be like, say, back in 2012, 2011, it wasn't unheard of for people to actually pay for a full-on type rating after they had finished their schooling. So after they've gone and got their commercial license, they would go and pay for a full type rating. Now, obviously this is a huge financial involvement. This would be more in a situation where you're looking, say, to fly directly for like a huge carrier like overseas. The requirements for them to hire you would already have a type rating, and you might not necessarily. Nowadays, I don't know how common that still is. I guess it's still obviously possible if that's what the route that you want to take. This is pre-COVID-19, obviously, but in terms of like the demand and just how the industry is moving, you're typically going to be getting your type rating as you actually move on to the airlines. Let's see. Have you ever delayed a sector due to unruly passengers? How do you deal with them? So that actually hasn't happened to myself, thankfully. We have had like unrulies, or a little bit like lower level unrulies once we're airborne. Maybe a couple people had too much to drink and they're starting to get a little bit rowdy or stuff, but there's obviously numerous levels of involvement, to the top level, kind of getting the police involved. So that's always an option for us, but it hasn't happened to myself, thankfully. What is the biggest con to being an airline pilot? Good question. I don't know if the initial salary might be one of the biggest cons, because it's tough, especially because most of us have huge amounts of debt to pay off. So it might be a split between the initial salary when you first start out, which is quite challenging, or how tiring it is. I think those are the two kind of biggest ones that can kind of come to mind. It was tough at the beginning with the commitment that you have to make financially, and then to get that salary back. Have you ever experienced a level bust or an approx event? I'm assuming like a TCAS or like a close call with another aircraft. How often do these occur? I haven't experienced this myself. Like I've experienced, say, a time where you've been leveled off at a different altitude than you would have originally been flight planned for due to air traffic control restrictions, or maybe as a request even from yourself based on, more favorable tailwinds or weather or turbulence. In terms of a bust, I mean, I can think back to when I was like a student, definitely gone way higher than I was like supposed to at one point. That's definitely happened, but in terms of like in the airline world, I don't think those happen quite as frequently, just because it's so controlled with air traffic control. So they're overseeing the entirety, of that sector. It's their responsibility to obviously keep us, safe distance between one another. The only other thing that I can kind of think about is, say, when you're cleared for a visual approach where there's two parallel runways. I've heard of instances where, because now it's not a specific heading that you're necessarily flying, and you're turning in, depending on like your spacing with the other aircraft that's on the other side of the runway. I've heard of those instances causing, a different TCAS event because you're getting too close proximity with the other aircraft. So I've heard of those things happening, but they're very infrequent. Is there a difference between the older Dash 8 that you flew compared to the Q400? Yes. So the original one that I flew, the one that I originally got type rated on, was the Dash 8 300. I did a differences course for the 100. So that one initially is the smaller one, it's the older version, whereas the Q400, it is a more powerful aircraft, it's got a longer tail, it's got a couple different systems. So they are different, but they are still included in the same type rating, believe it or not. Excluding lifestyle, would you ever want to fly fighter jets? Hell yeah. In your opinion, what is the most useless system on the Q400? And why is it the ANVS? The ANVS is our noise dampening system for the cabin. It's very frequent that it doesn't work. What is the most embarrassing reason you had to call maintenance? This was like right when I started, based out of Toronto still at the time. We were on a sit in Halifax and I accidentally shut the flight deck door shut from the outside, and I forgot that it auto unlocks when you're on the ground. And I shut it and then immediately kind of panicked. I went to go call maintenance, and an amazing maintenance engineer, she's based out of Halifax, she's fantastic. She just came and opened it, and I was like, oh, Yeah, thanks. And continuing on, what type of airplane do you want to fly next? Just like an actual plane. I don't think I can be picky right now, to be honest, so to be determined. What was the biggest challenge in your training? I think every single pilot will probably have like a different thing that was most challenging for them. By far, the thing that I struggled with the most, especially at the beginning, was getting into like the instrument flight rule, so like the IFR like world, because you're going from obviously flying, looking outside visually, like so your VFR, you know, visual flight rules. You're used to referencing everything on the outdoors, and like my situational awareness was pretty good in terms of just like what I could see, to all of a sudden having to switch to now doing everything just by instruments. I could read the instruments just fine, but in terms of picturing what I was doing almost like from above to get like a better idea of what was happening and what the next step was going to be, I had a really hard time at first to like switch that over. That switch was definitely the most challenging for myself. What are the main causes for turbulence? There's a couple different reasons. Turbulence is essentially caused by different air masses or changes in the airflow that is flowing over top and underneath the wing. Whenever it's just non-laminar flow, so whenever the airflow over the wing is not as smooth and there's like a little bit of bumps or like swirls or like eddies, is going to cause that turbulence, as well as just entering different air masses. So when you're going from, you know, like a warmer air mass to another, there's going to be changes in how the airflow is moving over the wings, which is what's going to cause that rocking and that shaking. There's also turbulence associated with thunderstorms or like a front moving through. So lots of different reasons for turbulence. Some of it is even just clear air turbulence. It's something that we're super familiar with and all pilots have to kind of get used to. So that's the main causes, and it's not a cause for concern. This is a really good one. What are the unwritten rules about what to do when passing other pilots in the airport? There's so many memes about this. Whenever you see another pilot, it's just like, hey, you just nod your head and you just move on with your day. Okay, a question, there was a couple of these questions about ATC, like what's the funniest conversation you have, or like how to talk to ATC. One of the funniest things that I've heard was I forget if it was Delta or United. It was in Calgary. Whoever the pilot happened to be, you know, for that flight, made their entire announcement to welcome the passengers to the upcoming airport. They made that full announcement on the radios. Instead of doing as a PA, they did it broadcasting to everybody else, and we heard the entire thing. And the best part about that was the air traffic controller that responded, that was like taking care and responsible for that sector, was like, that was a great PA, but you're on arrivals. And it was like silent after, and then my captain and I were laughing so hard during that. It was amazing. To go back to like how to talk to ATC, I think so many people get super caught up with this, and it's a little bit scary at first. Like I understand that, but you just have to remember they're just another human on the other side of the line. So like if you don't understand something that they're saying, or like you're like there's miscommunication, like it's just going back to like your basic. You just talk to them like you would a normal person. Like there is, you know, obviously certain phraseology and certain standards. You know, at the end of the day, if someone gets offended by something or you say something wrong, it's just like, it's not personal. Like it's just, you know, maybe they're having a bad day or you're having a bad day. Just keep practicing because it'll keep getting better. I like this one. Have you ever had to explain something to a non-aviation person that was really annoying? The thing that people who are not in the industry sometimes fail to understand, and it's through no fault of their own because they're not in the industry. So I think a lot of people just think, oh, why are you flying the Q400? Like, why not the 380 or whatever other aircraft? Be like, I want to fly this one. Like, it doesn't work like that. You have to kind of start your way from the bottom with much smaller operators, gain your experience, and like kind of work your way up to larger aircraft. You have to go by seniority, and you have to kind of wait your turn in line until you're eligible to fly that aircraft. Hopefully that made sense. That's like the one thing that sometimes people fail to recognize, and it can be like, oh, yeah, I have to explain this one more time. I thought I could finish off with this question, but why aviation? And it's funny, I kind of fell into it. Like, it wasn't something that I grew up thinking I wanted to be when I was like tiny. It was something that happened as like a second career, and it happened because I'd already been working, full-time as a massage therapist in my prior life, and I wasn't fully satisfied with what I was doing. I wanted to do something that was, involved traveling a little bit more, that involved me being outside, out and about, exploring, doing different things, interacting with different people. My dad just randomly suggested it to me. He had met someone and met like his client's daughter, and she happened to be a pilot. Why don't you look into, being a pilot? And he's not in the industry. There's no one in my family that's in the industry. It was completely random. At that moment, it was almost like something just like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, I gotta look into this. And I didn't know anything about it, so I did a bit of research and I ended up going for like a sightseeing intro flight for like a first timer. And the thing is, like, once you do those small flights, it's like it hooks you. Once you get into a small aircraft, it's super fun, and either you love it or you hate it right away. But the thing that was cool with aviation is that it wasn't just that part of the flying that really hooked me. The flying was fun, but then learning about everything else that's encompassed in like the aviation world was so fascinating to me. Maybe not air law. Everything else that I was doing at the time, it was so neat to be able to like always challenge yourself and work towards like a new goal that really, it just fit for me. It just kind of worked. So I just got into it, and like here I am. This is like 10 years later, and yeah, I can't picture myself doing anything else. So I'm like super stoked that my dad randomly introduced me to this, and here I am. All right, guys, that's it. That is all for part 2 of the Q&A that you guys asked me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I answered the questions that you guys asked me. If I did, please let me know in the comments what the question was that you had sent in and whether I answered it. Let me know what you guys think. There was another vlog topic that I mentioned that you guys want to hear more details. Please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.